The Push for Rights for the Disabled by Parker, Liam, and Connor.
Throughout most of human history, those with disabilities have been discriminated against. Since the 1800s, people with disabilities and those who support them have been pushing for more rights and better and easier lives for the disabled. This push is still going on today.
Rights for the disabled was a problem that was set aside by the government and the people of the United States time and time again. It wasn't until the late 1800s that the issue began to be treated. In that time, disabled was a term that was used to describe anybody different from the norm, such as people who couldn't walk or who had mental issues, and the reason was that nobody really understood these issues. The reason was problems like autism were not discovered then, and so it was very hard for the people to understand the issue that these handicapped people have. People with disabilities live their lives through constant mockery. Oftentimes, the handicapped folks received very little support from the community. Eventually, the government decided to make asylums for the disabled people, but it was just a way to get rid of the issue. The families of the handicapped people were the most supportive, and they were the ones that were willing to fight for the equality for the handicapped. It was only in the early 1900s that the problem of equality and care for the disabled was addressed by the government, which led to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973.
In the late 1800s to the 1900s, people with disabilities suffered from major discrimination in America. Those who opposed the discrimination worked to achieve equality among all people for things such as opportunities, rights, and treatments. In order to make this happen, people of concern worked to make change in their own communities. They worked to enable children with disabilities to be granted the same educational opportunities as those without disabilities. Parents argued that their children, if given the opportunity, could become equal from an intelligence perspective to those without disabilities. Yet, although this may have been the case, people with disabilities were nevertheless treated differently, made less money, and unfortunately had to use other methods of getting around, given that at the time there were no ramps or rails put into place to assist them. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was passed. This act meant that disabled people would be provided with equal opportunity for employment within the federally funded program. In addition to this act prohibited discrimination against the physically and mentally disabled.
Today, the issue of rights for the disabled is still a large problem. Many people still consider disabled people lesser than non-disabled people. This discrimination can be seen through popular TV shows such as Family Guy and South Park. Some progress has been made, such as many schools for the disabled and standardized parking and ramps for the disabled. Also, the power and capability of those with disabilities has been shown through events like the Paralympics. Until recently, disabled people had a much harder time getting affordable insurance due to pre-existing conditions. To make matters worse, the government still threatens to remove the money that is given to disabled people to help them. The money helps those with disabilities to be able to afford the cost of living, which is necessary because the disabled still have a hard time getting jobs. There is still much more progress that needs to be made until disabled people will be able to fully contribute to society.
The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in the 1990s. This act required companies to make sure all parts of the workplace could be accessed by disabled people. Also, that companies could not refuse to hire someone due to a disability. All public places were required to be accessible by the disabled, as well as all communications were required to be able to be received by those with disabilities. This act showed that the American government was ready to aid the disabled in being able to fully participate in society. This act has not removed all discrimination, especially prejudice, like the kind which was discussed in the video. Nor have all the promises of the act been kept. But the ADA is a large step in the right direction.